This is part 2 of Robyn Rocket Zoom Zoom with Charles Hayward. Hi, I'm Robyn Rocket, and in 2023 I made a radio series on Resonance FM. It was funded by Arts Council England, and the executive producer was Paul Dutnall. I'd like to thank everybody who was involved in making that happen, and I thought it'd be a great idea to make a podcast. And we left the previous episode, we'd learnt about him growing up in Camberwell, about his band with Phil Manzera, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Roxy Music, and we just left him. He was in the Mojos, and one of the Mojos was also a Womble. Well, I wanted to know what happened next. Here is what happened next on the Robyn Rocket Zoom Zoom podcast.
I played all these sort of like working men's clubs and Talk of the South, sort of top rank cabaret places. But I was also sort of keeping my name known, doing all these auditions with bands that people who sort of gave me the time of day, but nothing happened. And eventually I got a call from Gong. So I joined Gong for 2 months, but I was much too young. I couldn't handle it. And then I went back to waiting for the phone to ring and stuff.
Tell me about some of the other bands that you were in at that time.
I was in a very early free improvisation group called Amazing Band, which was led by a guy called Mal Dean. That was an incredible experience. I learned an amazing amount from Mal Dean. The whole thing grew up from us playing together. One time Mal said, it's Coltrane or it's Coleman in terms of two roads forward. Coltrane uses the piano and Ornette doesn't. Therefore, the avenue suggested by Ornette has got more potential in it. And it was like, oh my gosh, yeah. That really sort of influenced me, that comment.
And how did this heat come about?
Well, I got a call from Jeff Lee, who used to be in Henry Cow, and we had a band that was in two parts. It had Jerry Fitzgerald and Jack Monk on bass, Catherine Williams, Jeff Lee and me. And then Jerry and Jack left, and Charles Bullen and Alan Muller joined. The group was too influenced by things like Gong and stuff. It wasn't really itself. I knew there was some other music happening somewhere in my head. There was something that was more distinct. Then the thing with Jeff Lee just wasn't working, so Charles and I left, and we sort of determined that we were going to make a group that was going to be something more distinctive and less jazz and less silly, less gong, less, I don't know, silly stories, more X-ray photography. And we were improvising, but we weren't improvising jazz, and we weren't improvising European free improvisation. We were sort of improvising these weird pictures, sort of weird little atmospheres. So there was an indication that there was something else. It was less about notes and more about sort of the density of the air, more like that Johnny Kidd and the Pilot stuff where the sound comes out and wraps around you. Less book, less music, more sound. We sort of had a real confidence in what we were doing. And we reached out quite sort of proactively to John Peel. We made a nuisance of ourselves, in other words. And we had a cassette that was blue and yellow, our demo cassette. And that meant that people could see it very, very, oh yeah, it's on the second pile from the top. And we'd be phoning up all the time. And then when they heard it, they liked it a lot. We got on Peel. And because of that, we got gigs abroad. Oh, while I was in this group with Jeff Lee, Phil Manzanera got a budget to make a solo album because Roxy Music had big hits and stuff. And instead of making just one album, he made two. He made his solo album, and he also invited Quiet Sun to get back together again. And we recorded an album. It's called Mainstream. Because the original group split up in like 1971 or something, there'd been this 4-year break and everybody had got sort of better. I know I got much better. When we recorded, it was much better than a version of the group than the one that was the original version. It's sort of oxyacetylene prog rock or something, but it's got no inflatable dinosaurs or silly stories about it. It's mostly instrumental. The only song on there is one of mine.
Why did Not This Heat happen?
That happened because I did a gig with Alan Wilkinson and Matt Mattel. I was playing because I like playing with Alan Wilkinson, because I think Alan Wilkinson's a super intense player. And afterwards, this guy came up on stage and sort of introduced himself and said he wanted to make a series of records of people covering this Heat material. And then Light in the Attic was going to re-release this Heat. And he went, oh, well, that blows the covers project completely out of the water. But what about if you were to play a gig to launch the reissue? So he suggested that we have this reunion thing. And at first, Charles and I weren't going to play that much on it. Well, there was no way I couldn't play it. I just had to be doing it because I just love the songs, and I love the fact that I knew we could play it better than we played it then. That's how it happened, really.
And can you tell me about Camberwell Now?
Camberwell Now was the group after this Heat that built a cassette switchboard and made 2 EPs and 1 album. The album's called The Ghost Trade.
What's a cassette switchboard?
It was 4 stereo cassettes, each with a left and a right, so 2 different sounds on them that would then be played through a sort of series of like almost Morse code keys, so that when you press them down, you'd hear what was on the cassette, and when you took your finger off, you wouldn't hear what was on the cassette. And we'd make our own sounds. We'd record things like Saturday Night in a pub. So it was somewhere between a sound machine and a sort of almost like a mellotron or something. But we'd make the sounds ourselves. We'd make bass notes using a metal rod, and they'd sort of like there'd be quite a bit of sort of vibrato in them. And then you're playing one against another, both of them doing that. So the thing would be very, very well. As I say, the album's called The Ghost Trade. It was like we were playing these ghosts.
I know you for your community work. Can you tell me a bit about how that developed?
One of this Heat's sound engineers found a disused morgue and coroner's court, and he sort of got inside and he decided that it would be a great place for a youth music project. And then just about the start of Camberwell Now, I got invited to be the drum teacher. It meant if I had to go away, I could get a dep. So I was able to sort of be making my music and then earning some money on a slightly regular basis, doing this thing that helped me integrate into Deptford, basically. I'd been squatting in Deptford since 1976, and then I'd gone into a council flat, and I'm still in a council flat. And I got to know people, I got to know their kids, I got to see them grow up. I know the people I taught music, I meet them walking down the street now, and they're people with their own children.
Did you enjoy teaching?
I absolutely adored it. I adored it. I learned from it constantly. I loved working with the young people. Everybody learned from it. We confronted ourselves through it. People come up to me afterwards and sort of like not really talked about the drums at all, talked to me about how it helped them find themselves. So then I started working with a group called Entelechy.
Well, on Entelechy's Arts website, it says, Entelechy Arts was founded in 1989 at the request of the Lewisham and North Suffolk Health Authority to support the resettlement of people with learning disabilities from the old mental handicap asylums to communities in South East London.
The thing I was involved in is called ambient jam, and I always understood it as being like an even field between everybody. So you had people who were designated as people who needed help, and other people who were designated as, I'm talking about designated by the outside world, not by the people themselves. We take everybody's signal seriously. We would be introduced to whole other ways of sort of experiencing the world, and then we would synthesize that back via the fact that one way or another I'm obsessed with sound, and one way or another someone else is obsessed with dance. Everybody will interact with everybody else's work, and that interaction will then be interacted with, but where everybody's equal. There isn't like a professional and a person who doesn't really know and can't really quite express and can't really be taken seriously because they don't use language the way we do.
Did it get in the way of your other music work?
This was part of it. It seemed that the fact that I was a functioning musician was part of what I was bringing to the party in the community music setting, a connection that nobody ran away from. They sort of welcomed. Somehow or other, it wasn't getting in the way of what I make. I was learning from it. It was providing me, as a father of three, with a regular income, and I was getting to know more and more of the people I lived amongst. And this seemed to be a sort of no-brainer. But the thing was, I was applying myself to thinking about it. I thought about it a lot. I'd be working on a song, and then I'd be thinking about sort of almost interactive diagrams between particular people in particular workshops and other people in workshops and me, and how to engender more self-confidence, or being more proactive and less reactive, or listening more and being more reactive. So I was thinking about the people I was working with, and I was thinking about it in abstract, sort of almost quasi-compositional game structure terms, very, very actively. I was doing that. That was part of what my practice was. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about writing songs. I was thinking about how what I'd learned from the workshops interacted with how I would want to work on a song. Everything was interacting with everything else, and everything was taken very seriously. So I was doing distinct work from one workshop to another. I wasn't making a generic sort of workshop thing. I was responding to the age group I was working with. I was getting good gear off me, good work off me, because I wanted to do it, and I was learning from it, and it was joyful.
Do you want to tell me a bit about Abstract Concrete?
Abstract Concrete is all I really want to talk about in some ways. So this is a new group with Agat Max on viola, Roberto Sassi on an electric guitar, Yoni Silva on keyboards, Otto Wilberg on bass, and me on drums and vocals. It's very, very structured music, hardly any improvisation at all. It's centered around the idea of song, but song extended not as much as possible, but less grounded in its own orbit and more able to sort of handle stuff that isn't song inside it.
What do you mean by stuff that isn't song?
Well, I suppose taking the instrumental reality and the instrumental themes and stuff like that as if they were another character, another a central voice, as opposed to sort of this idea of accompaniment or illustration or description, but sort of more the song isn't all about language. I think basically I have a problem with words. I sort of know how words can be used to manipulate. And I mostly think that if we were in some sort of utopian place, which is not going to happen, but if we were in some sort of space like that in fact we'd sing everything. Nothing would be spoken. Everything would be sung. I think our politics should be sung. I think the Houses of Parliament people should sing, because that way, each time you use each word is not only just the word it is, but it's also that specific word that at that moment. And also because I can hear lies and mendacity and deception and manipulation inside people's voices, politicians' voices, especially media people's voices. And I would think that song would expose that more clearly.
Robyn Rocket's Zoom Zoom podcast. With me, Robyn Rocket, my guest was Charles Hayward, the executive producer was Paul Dutnall, and thank you to you for listening. Bye!